You never really know someone until they have power over you. That's what I learned the winter my landlord, Mr. Halvorsen, decided I was disposable. I'd lived in apartment 3B for almost 4 years, tucked above the bakery on Main Street, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt sugar. The rent was fair, the walls were thin, and the radiators clanked like ghosts in the night, but it was home. Or at least, it was until the day I found the eviction notice taped to my door, flapping in the January wind like a white flag I never agreed to wave. I remember the moment with perfect clarity. I'd just come back from a double shift at the hospital, my scrubs still smelling faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion. The hallway was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you question every life choice that led you to a drafty walk-up in a city that never quite thaws. The paper was official, stamped and signed, with my name spelled wrong in bold, angry letters. Notice to vacate. 30 days. No explanation, no warning, just a deadline and a threat. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I'd never missed a payment, never thrown a party, never so much as left my trash in the wrong bin. I paid my rent on time every time, even when it meant eating ramen for a week or skipping the occasional night out. I was the kind of tenant landlords dream about. Quiet, responsible, and visible. But Mr. Halvorsen wasn't the kind of landlord who cared about that. He cared about money, and rumor had it he'd been eyeing a deal with a developer who wanted to turn our building into luxury condos. Suddenly, my reliability was a liability. I was in the way. I knocked on his office door the next morning, heart pounding, eviction notice clutched in my hand. The office was a converted storage closet at the back of the building, walls lined with faded certificates and a single, dusty plant that looked as tired as I felt. Mr. Halvorsen didn't look up from his computer when I walked in. He just gestured to the chair across from him, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Is this some kind of mistake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've always paid on time. I haven't broken any rules." He finally looked at me, his expression flat and unreadable. "It's not personal," he said, as if that made it better. "The building's changing hands. I need everyone out by the end of the month." "But my lease." He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Your lease is month to month. I can terminate it whenever I want. That's the law." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. I left his office feeling smaller than I'd ever felt, the eviction notice crumpled in my fist. That night, I lay awake listening to the radiators clink and the wind howl through the cracks in the window, wondering how I'd let myself become so powerless. But here's the thing about power. It's never as absolute as people think. Sometimes, the smallest person in the room is the one holding the match. And sometimes, all it takes is a little spark to burn the whole house down. I started by reading everything I could about tenant rights. I spent hours online, scrolling through legal forums and city ordinances, my eyes blurring from the tiny print and legal jargon. I learned that, yes, my lease was technically month to month, but there were rules about how and why a landlord could evict a tenant. There were protections against retaliation, against bad faith evictions, against landlords who thought they could bulldoze their way through people's lives for a quick profit. I found a local tenants union and attended a meeting in the basement of a church 2 blocks away. The room was packed with people just like me. Nurses, teachers, retirees, all of us clinging to our homes by our fingernails. The union leader, a woman named Carla with a voice like gravel and eyes that missed nothing, listened to my story and nodded. "You're not the first," she said. "And you won't be the last. But you don't have to take this lying down." Carla helped me draft a letter to Mr. Halvorsen, citing the specific city codes he was violating. We sent it certified mail, and a return receipt was requested. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every notice, every time he forgot to fix the leaking faucet or the broken lock on the front door. I took photos, saved emails, and kept a log of every interaction. If he wanted a fight, I was going to give him one. But I didn't stop there. I started talking to my neighbors, knocking on doors, sharing what I'd learned. Most of them had gotten eviction notices too, and most of them were scared, ready to pack up and leave without a word. But fear is contagious, and so is courage. The more we talked, the more we realized we weren't alone. We started meeting in the hallway, in the laundry room, in the bakery downstairs, sharing stories and strategies. We formed a tenants association, elected officers, pooled our resources for legal fees. Mr. Halvorsen didn't see it coming. He thought we'd scatter like mice at the first sign of trouble. Instead, we became a wall he couldn't push through. We filed complaints with the city, called in building inspectors, and exposed every code violation he'd tried to hide. The bakery owner, Mrs. Kim, found a leak in her ceiling that turned out to be a major plumbing issue. The city slapped Mr. Halvorsen with fines, and suddenly, his quick sale wasn't looking so quick. But the real turning point came when I found the paper trail. Late one night, while sorting through old mail, I found a letter addressed to Mr. Halvorsen from the developer. It was a thinly veiled offer to buy the building, contingent on it being vacant and ready for immediate renovation. The date on the letter was 2 months before any of us got our eviction notices. That letter was the missing piece, the proof that this wasn't just business. It was a calculated move to clear us out for profit. I scanned it, saved a copy, and sent it to Carla at the tenants union. She read it and whistled low, her eyes lighting up with the kind of satisfaction you only get when the villain finally slips up. "This is gold," she said. "He's not just evicting you. He's orchestrating a mass displacement for a sweetheart deal. That's illegal in this city, especially if he didn't disclose it to the tenants or the city council." Armed with this evidence, we took our fight public. Carla helped us draft a press release, and soon a local reporter was knocking on my door, notebook in hand, camera crew in tow. I told my story, and so did my neighbors. We talked about the bakery, the families, the elderly couple on the top floor who'd lived there since the 70s. We talked about how Mr. Halvorsen had ignored repairs, how he'd tried to intimidate us, how he'd lied about his intentions. The story ran on the evening news, complete with shots of the eviction notices, the crumbling stairwell, and Mrs. Kim's leaky ceiling. The response was immediate. The city council called an emergency meeting. Protesters showed up outside the building, waving signs and chanting slogans. The tenants' union organized a rent strike, and suddenly, Mr. Halvorsen was facing a full-blown PR crisis. The developer, sensing trouble, started to backpedal, sending carefully worded statements to the press about community engagement and responsible development. But the damage was done. The city launched an investigation, and Mr. Halvorsen was called to testify. I'll never forget the day he sat in front of the council, sweating under the harsh fluorescent lights, trying to explain why he'd issued eviction notices to every tenant in the building just weeks before a lucrative sale. The council members weren't buying it. They grilled him on the repairs he'd neglected, the complaints he'd ignored, the letter from the developer. He stammered, deflected, and tried to blame the tenants for creating a hostile environment. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the council wasn't interested in excuses. Meanwhile, our tenants association was gaining momentum. We started a petition, gathering signatures from neighbors, local business owners, and even customers at the bakery. We held rallies, invited city officials to tour the building, and shared our stories on social media. The support was overwhelming. People who'd never met us showed up with coffee, baked goods, and offers of legal help. The city's housing department assigned us a pro bono attorney, a sharp young woman named Priya who specialized in tenant rights cases. Priya was relentless. She pored over our leases, the city codes, the developer's offer. She found loopholes, inconsistencies, and outright violations. She filed an injunction to halt the evictions, arguing that Mr. Halvorsen had acted in bad faith and failed to provide adequate notice. The judge agreed, issuing a temporary stay that kept us in our homes while the case moved forward. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The fear that had settled in my chest like a stone began to lift. My neighbors and I celebrated with coffee and pastries in the bakery, laughing and sharing stories late into the night. We weren't out of the woods yet, but we'd bought ourselves time. And, more importantly, we'd found our voice. But Mr. Halvorsen wasn't done. He started showing up at odd hours, banging on doors, demanding to inspect apartments for safety violations. He left threatening notes, called the police with bogus complaints about noise and vandalism. He tried to divide us, offering cash to tenants who would leave quietly and threatening those who wouldn't. For the first time, we allowed ourselves to imagine a future where we weren't living in fear. But the fight wasn't over. Mr. Halvorsen hired a high-priced attorney and tried to paint himself as the victim of a tenant conspiracy. He claimed we were sabotaging his business, spreading lies, and damaging his reputation. The courtroom became a battleground, each side presenting evidence, calling witnesses, and arguing over every detail. Priya was a force of nature, dismantling his arguments with calm precision. She presented our documentation, photos, emails, the developer's letter, the falsified reports. She called former tenants to testify, each one telling a story that echoed our own. I took the stand, my hands trembling as I recounted the months of harassment, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing my home. I spoke about the community we'd built, the support we'd found in each other, and the determination that had kept us fighting. As I spoke, I saw the judge's expression shift from skepticism to understanding. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a story of people standing up for their rights, refusing to be steamrolled by someone who saw them as obstacles rather than human beings. The trial dragged on for weeks, each day bringing new revelations. The city's investigation uncovered even more violations. Unsafe wiring, unpermitted construction, unreturned security deposits. The press followed every twist and turn, and public opinion turned sharply against Mr. Halvorsen. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Homes Not Profits" and "Stop the Evictions." The developer, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, issued a public apology and pledged to work with the city on affordable housing initiatives. Through it all, our tenants association held strong. We met every week, sharing updates and supporting each other. The sense of solidarity was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. We weren't just fighting for our homes, we were building something new, something better. Then, one morning, Priya called with news that changed everything. "The judge has issued a ruling," she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "He's found in our favor. The evictions are void and Mr. Halvorsen is liable for damages. The city is revoking his rental license, and the building is being placed under receivership." I sat in stunned silence, the words sinking in. We'd won. After months of fear, uncertainty, and struggle, we'd finally prevailed. The relief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that washed away the anxiety and exhaustion that had become my constant companions. I called my neighbors, and soon we were all gathered in the bakery, hugging, laughing, and crying tears of joy. Mrs. Kim brought out a tray of pastries, and for the first time in months, the air was filled with celebration instead of dread. But victory brought new challenges. With the building under receivership, we had to decide what came next. The city appointed a property manager to oversee repairs and ensure the building met safety standards. The Tenants Association worked closely with the manager, prioritizing urgent fixes and advocating for long-term improvements. We applied for grants, organized volunteer workdays, and even started a fund to help tenants buy shares in the building if it ever went up for sale. As the repairs progressed, the building began to transform. The leaky ceilings were patched, the wiring replaced, the stairwells repainted. The sense of pride and ownership grew with every improvement. We held a block party to celebrate the completion of the renovations, inviting neighbors, city officials, and even the press. The story of our fight had inspired other tenants across the city, and soon, similar associations were forming in buildings that had once been silent and isolated. Meanwhile, Mr. Halvorsen's troubles were far from over. The criminal investigation into his business practices expanded, uncovering a pattern of fraud and neglect that stretched back years. The banks foreclosed on his other properties, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. The developer sued him for breach of contract, and former tenants filed additional lawsuits. His reputation, once built on intimidation and greed, was now synonymous with scandal and failure. I watched it all unfold with a sense of closure, but not satisfaction. I hadn't set out to destroy Mr. Halvorsen. I just wanted to keep my home. But when someone uses their power to hurt others, sometimes the only way to stop them is to take that power away. In the end, he lost everything because he underestimated the people he thought were powerless. Life in the building settled into a new rhythm. The fear that had once haunted the halls was replaced by a sense of community and possibility. We started hosting potlucks, movie nights, and holiday parties. The bakery became the heart of the building, a place where neighbors gathered to share news, celebrate victories, and support each other through setbacks. The Tenants Association continued to meet, not just to address problems, but to dream about the future. I found myself growing in ways I never expected. I became more confident, more outspoken, more willing to stand up for myself and others. I realized that the fight for our homes had changed me, had shown me the strength I never knew I had. I wasn't just a tenant anymore. I was part of a community, a movement, a family forged in the fires of adversity. As spring arrived, the city seemed to thaw along with our building. The bakery's windows were thrown open, letting in the scent of rising dough and the laughter of children who played hopscotch on the sidewalk. I'd never realized how much a place could change when the people inside it felt safe. How the energy shifted, how even the walls seemed to breathe easier. The Tenants Association, once a lifeline in a crisis, became a hub for new ideas. We started a newsletter, sharing updates on repairs, upcoming events, and resources for renters' rights. Carla from the union became a regular visitor, helping us connect with other buildings and offering workshops on everything from financial literacy to conflict resolution. The city, impressed by our resilience, invited us to speak at council meetings about tenant protections and affordable housing. For the first time, our voices mattered. I found myself stepping into roles I'd never imagined. I helped organize a tutoring program for the kids in the building, many of whom had struggled during the months of uncertainty. I worked with Mrs. Kim to set up a food pantry in the bakery, making sure no one went hungry. I even started a small garden on the roof, coaxing tomatoes and herbs from the stubborn city soil. Each new project was a reminder that we were more than survivors, that we were builders, creators, neighbors. But the scars of our battle lingered. Some tenants moved out, unable to shake the anxiety that came from months of instability. Others struggled to trust the new property manager, wary of promises after so many disappointments. There were arguments, setbacks, moments when it felt like the old fear might creep back in. But each time, we came together, talking things through, finding solutions. As spring arrived, the city seemed to thaw along with our building. The bakery's windows were thrown open, letting in the scent of rising dough and the laughter of children who played hopscotch on the sidewalk, using to let the past define us. One afternoon, as I watered the rooftop garden, I spotted Priya climbing the stairs, a stack of papers in her hand and a rare smile on her face. She nodded. With grants, low-interest loans, and the support of the city, it's possible. It won't be easy, but if anyone can do it, it's you all. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. We called an emergency meeting in the bakery, the room buzzing with excitement and nerves. Priya explained the process, the risks, the responsibilities. Some tenants were hesitant, worried about the financial commitment. Others were eager, already dreaming of what we could do with true ownership. We debated late into the night, weighing every option, every fear, every hope. In the end, we voted unanimously to pursue the purchase. The next few months were a whirlwind of paperwork, fundraising, and negotiations. We worked with the city, the banks, and a nonprofit that specialized in cooperative housing. We held bake sales, applied for grants, and even launched a crowdfunding campaign that drew support from across the city. The story of our fight had inspired people, and now they wanted to help us build something lasting. The day we signed the papers, the entire building gathered in the courtyard. There were speeches, hugs, and more than a few tears. Mrs. Kim brought out a cake, decorated with the words, "Welcome home." For the first time, we weren't just tenants. We were owners, partners, stewards of our own future. Owning the building changed everything. We set our own rents, reinvested profits into repairs and improvements, and made decisions as a community. The sense of pride was palpable. People painted their doors, planted flowers, and hung art in the hallways. The building, once a symbol of fear and uncertainty, became a beacon of hope. But perhaps the most profound change was internal. I found myself reflecting on the journey, on the person I'd become. I remembered the fear I'd felt when I first saw that eviction notice, the helplessness that threatened to swallow me whole. I remembered the nights spent researching tenant law, the meetings in the bakery, the courtroom battles. I remembered the faces of my neighbors, the way we'd leaned on each other, the way we'd refused to give up. I realized that power isn't just about money or property or legal documents. It's about community, about standing together in the face of injustice, about refusing to be silenced. It's about finding your voice and using it not just for yourself, but for those who can't speak. It's about turning fear into action and action into change. As summer approached, the city recognized our building as a model for tenant empowerment. Other neighborhoods reached out, asking for advice, wanting to replicate our success. Carla and Priya helped us organize workshops, and soon, tenant associations were springing up all over the city. The movement we'd started was growing, spreading hope and courage to people who'd once felt powerless. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood on the rooftop garden, looking out at the skyline. The lights of the bakery glowed below, and the laughter of children drifted up from the courtyard. I thought about Mr. Halvorsen, about the power he'd once wielded, and how quickly it had crumbled when faced with a united community. I thought about the journey from fear to freedom, from isolation to solidarity. I knew there would be challenges ahead: maintenance issues, financial hurdles, disagreements among neighbors. But I also knew we could face them together. We'd already proven that we were stronger than any landlord, any developer, any threat. We'd built something real, something lasting, something no one could take away. The seasons turned, and with each passing month, our building became more than just a place to live. It became a testament to what ordinary people can accomplish when they refuse to be pushed aside. The bakery's morning rush was now filled with familiar faces, neighbors who greeted each other by name, who shared news and worries and laughter over coffee. The rooftop garden flourished, a patchwork of green in the heart of the city, tended by hands that once trembled with uncertainty but now worked with purpose and pride. Sometimes, I'd catch myself pausing in the hallway, listening to the sounds of life echoing through the building, a child's giggle, the clink of dishes, the low hum of conversation. These were the sounds of a community that had survived the storm and found its footing on the other side. I thought back to the day I'd found that eviction notice, how small and powerless I'd felt, how impossible it had seemed to fight back. If I could go back and speak to that version of myself, I'd tell her, "You're not alone. You are never as powerless as you think." Word of our story spread far beyond our block. Local news outlets followed up with features on our cooperative, and city officials pointed to our building as proof that tenant power could reshape neighborhoods for the better. We were invited to speak at housing conferences, to share our journey with others who were just beginning their own fights. Each time, I saw the same spark in their eyes: the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could win too. As for Mr. Halvorsen, he faded from our lives like a bad dream. The last I heard, he'd left the city, his properties sold off to pay debts and legal fees. I didn't feel anger or triumph when I thought of him. Just a quiet certainty that justice, in its own way, had been served. He'd tried to evict us, to erase us for profit, but in the end, he'd lost everything because he underestimated the strength of a community united by purpose. Looking back, I realized that the true victory wasn't just keeping our homes or winning a lawsuit. It was the transformation that happened within each of us. The courage we found, the friendships we forged, the belief that we could shape our own destinies. We'd started as strangers, bound only by circumstance, but we'd become something more, a family, chosen and built through adversity. Now, when I walk through the front door, I no longer brace myself for bad news. I know I belong here. I know that together, we can face whatever comes next. And if anyone ever tries to take that from us again, they'll find out just how much power lives in the hearts of people who refuse to be moved.